Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I started driving for Uber back in late 2018. I've been at it for about 6 months and had gotten pretty good at reading people and situations. It was one of those early winter nights in Detroit when the temperature wasn't quite brutal yet, maybe around 40 degrees. I've been driving for about 3 hours and had picked up a decent mix of riders. The request came in around 11 p.m. 4 passengers, pickup location downtown near the entertainment district. The trip was only about 5 minutes away from where I was sitting, so I accepted it. The destination looked like it was heading out to one of the suburbs, which meant a decent fare for me. I pulled up to the GPS coordinates and started looking around for my passengers. This happened all the time in downtown Detroit. The GPS would drop you off at some random spot and you'd have to play a game of hide and seek with your riders. Sometimes they'd be around the corner, sometimes they'd be in a completely different building. It was just part of the job. After sitting there for about 2 minutes, my phone rang. The caller ID showed the name from the ride request. I answered and told him I was his Uber driver at the pickup location. The guy sounded totally normal. He was polite and calm, just trying to figure out where I was so we could connect. This was the usual dance. I asked if he was near the big glass building, and he said he'd look around. He thought he could see my car and told me to give them just a second. Everything seemed fine. This was how these conversations usually went. But then I heard some shuffling and muffled talking in the background. Someone else wanted to talk to me. The tone was immediately different. Where the first guy had sounded reasonable and patient, this new voice carried an edge. It was a British or Indian accent, I couldn't quite place it, but the attitude came through crystal clear. The new guy asked where exactly I was and complained that they'd been standing there waiting. I explained that I was right at the location the app sent me to and asked him to tell me what he could see around him so I could try to find them. But then he started getting nasty. He told me they were freezing out there and there was no reason for me to be taking so long. I felt my jaw tighten. I'd been sitting there for maybe 3 minutes total, and this guy was already acting like I'd kept them waiting for an hour. I tried to explain that I had just gotten there a few minutes ago and was trying to locate them so we could get going, but he kept talking over me, saying they were standing in the middle of the sidewalk and it was so cold outside. He said he didn't understand why I was making them wait like this. The way he said it wasn't just complaining. It was condescending, like I was some incompetent employee who couldn't do his job right. He barely paused to let me respond, just kept talking over me with this fake polite tone that was clearly covering up his real attitude. I tried again to be reasonable. I told him I wasn't making them wait and that I was right there trying to find them. I asked if he could just tell me what building they were near or what they could see so I could come to them. But he just got worse. He said this was ridiculous and that they had called a car service, not a treasure hunt. He told me to figure out where I was and come get them. I've been driving for months and dealt with drunk people, rude people, people who tried to stuff too many passengers in my car, but this guy's attitude was something else. He wasn't just frustrated. He was treating me like I was beneath him, like his time was more valuable than mine. The whole situation was stupid anyway. These were 4 grown men in their 40s, standing on a sidewalk in weather that wasn't even that cold. They could have walked around the block to find me in the time they spent complaining, but instead, one of them decided to get on the phone and talk to me like I was his personal servant. I looked at the ride details on my phone. It was going to be about a 20-minute trip to the suburbs. 20 minutes in my car with this entitled jerk and his friends. 20 minutes of probably listening to him complain about every turn I made or every red light we hit. Then he asked if I was even listening to him and demanded that I come find them right now. I told him he was going to have to find another ride and hung up the phone before he could respond. My fingers moved quickly across the app screen, canceling the ride and marking it as a passenger behavior issue. The app asked me for details and I typed in a quick note about the passenger being rude and disrespectful. Within seconds, my phone started ringing again. Same number. I declined the call and watched as they tried 2 more times. On the third attempt, I turned my phone to silent and pulled away from the curb. When I drove past the area where they were supposedly waiting, I spotted them. Four guys in business casual clothes, standing near a restaurant entrance, looking around frantically. One of them was waving his phone in the air like he was trying to get a signal. I slowed down just enough to get a good look at their faces, then drove right past them. My phone lit up with notification after notification. They were probably trying to call me, maybe even requesting another ride and getting matched with a different driver who was now 20 minutes away instead of 20 seconds. I picked up my next passenger 15 minutes later, a college student who needed to get back to her dorm. She was polite, said thank you when I helped her with her bags, and even gave me a 5-star rating. The whole ride reminded me why I actually enjoyed driving most of the time. Later that night, I got a notification that the canceled passengers had tried to report me to Uber. The app asked me to provide my side of the story, which I did. I explained that the passenger was verbally abusive and condescending, and that I didn't feel safe completing the ride. Uber sided with me and removed any negative marks from my account. I work in construction and my wife does part-time bookkeeping, but with our oldest starting college soon and our middle daughter needing new school supplies constantly, we decided we needed to get serious about cutting expenses. That's when I made the decision to switch insurance companies. Our old provider was charging us an arm and a leg, and after shopping around, I found a company that could save us about $200 a year. Not a fortune, but every bit helps when you're trying to make ends meet. The new insurance company was pretty straightforward about their requirements. They needed proof that our 19-year-old son had completed his driver's education course to qualify for the good student discount. Simple enough, I thought. He had taken the course last year and passed both the classroom portion and the road test with flying colors. I called him into the kitchen one evening after dinner to ask about the certificate. I told him I needed a copy of his driver's education completion certificate for the new insurance company. He asked why they needed it, and I explained it was for a discount that could save us money on the premiums. He said he would call them tomorrow. A week went by and I hadn't heard anything, so I followed up with him. I asked if he had gotten the certificate yet. He said he had called them, but there was some issue with his file. That's when I decided to call the driving school myself. What I found out made my blood pressure spike. The woman on the phone was polite but direct. She told me that my son could not receive a completion certificate because he never finished the online portion of the course. I asked what online portion she was talking about. She explained that all students were required to complete both the in-person classroom hours and the online modules. My son had completed the classroom time and passed his road test, but he never logged in to complete the digital coursework. I hung up the phone and immediately called my son downstairs. I told him we needed to talk and explained that the driving school said he never completed the online part of his course. He casually admitted that he hadn't done that part. When I asked why not, he said it was because it was pointless, and he already learned everything he needed to know in the actual classes. I stared at him for a moment, trying to process what I was hearing. I asked if he knew he was supposed to complete it. He said sure, but he thought it was optional or something because the important stuff was the real driving lessons. I reminded him that it wasn't optional and was part of the contract we signed and paid for. We had paid $715 for that course. He brushed it off, saying he could drive fine and had passed his test. I told him that wasn't the point. The point was that he had agreed to complete the entire program and didn't. He asked what the big deal was, since he had his license. I explained that the big deal was that now I couldn't get the certificate the insurance company needed, which meant our premiums were going to be $13 higher every month. He scoffed and said $13 was like nothing, and that I spent more than that on coffee in a week. That comment really got to me. Here I was, trying to cut every corner I could to keep our family financially stable, and he was dismissing $13 like it was pocket change. I told him that $13 a month was $156 a year. That might not seem like much to him, but when you're trying to budget for a family of 5, every dollar matters. He said okay, but insisted it wasn't his fault the insurance company had weird requirements. I corrected him, saying it actually was his fault. If he had completed the course like he was supposed to, we wouldn't have this problem. He said he didn't see how it was fair to blame him for something so stupid. That's when I realized I was dealing with an entitled attitude that needed to be addressed immediately. I told him what was going to happen. Since his decision to skip part of the course was costing me $13 extra every month, I was reducing his allowance by $13. He immediately protested, saying I couldn't do that. I told him I absolutely could do that. He had made a choice that had a real financial impact on this family, so he got to share in that outcome. He called it ridiculous and said I was punishing him for something he didn't even know mattered. I reminded him that he knew it was required. He just decided it wasn't important enough to do. He complained that taking $13 from his allowance was petty. I asked him if he thought it was petty and offered some perspective. $13 was exactly what he spent on his usual order at Mary Brown's. So now instead of getting that 3-piece combo once a month on my dime, he would have to decide if it was worth spending his own money on. He said it wasn't fair and that I was nickeling and dimming him. I told him what fair would really look like. Fair would be making him reimburse me the full $715 I paid for a course he didn't complete. Fair would be taking him off my insurance entirely and telling him to get his own policy. Fair would be taking away his driving privileges until he learned to follow through on his commitments. My wife came into the kitchen during this conversation and asked what all the yelling was about. I told her that her son thought it was unfair that his decision to blow off part of his driver's education was costing him $13 a month in allowance. She asked what had happened with the driver's education. I explained the whole situation to her while my son stood there looking increasingly uncomfortable. She asked him to clarify if he had one job to do, which was complete the course we paid for, and he just decided not to finish it. He said the online part was stupid and boring. She asked if it was true that because of his decision, we were now paying more for insurance. He minimized it by saying it was only $13. My wife told him that $13 was $13. That was money we could use for groceries or to put toward his sister's school supplies. He said he didn't think it would matter. I told him that was exactly the problem. He didn't think. He made a selfish decision, and now he was upset that there were results. He said fine, whatever, and that this family was crazy anyway. He walked out to the kitchen and slammed his bedroom door. My wife and I looked at each other. She asked if I thought we were being too harsh. I said not even close. If anything, we were being generous. He needed to learn that his actions affected other people. The next morning at breakfast, my son was still sulking. He asked if I was really going to take money out of his allowance every month. I said yes until he either completed that online coursework or until he moved out and got his own insurance. He asked if he could still do the online part. I told him I had already asked and the window for completion had closed 6 months ago. He said it was so unfair. I told him what would actually be unfair. If I let this slide and taught him that he could break commitments without any outcome. I asked what would happen when he did this with a job or a lease or a loan. He said it wasn't the same thing. I told him it was exactly the same thing. He had signed up for something, didn't follow through, and now there were financial results. 2 weeks later, something interesting happened. My son came to me with a job application. He said he was thinking about getting a part-time job. I asked what had changed his mind. He explained that if he was going to lose $13 a month, he might as well make up for it somewhere else. I told him that was actually a pretty mature way to look at it. He said he still thought I was being unfair, but he understood that I was trying to teach him something. I explained that I was trying to teach him that his choices had outcomes, good and bad. And sometimes those outcomes affected other people. He ended up getting a job at a local grocery store, and you know what? He's actually proud of earning his own money. The $13 reduction in allowance suddenly doesn't seem like such a big deal when he's bringing home his own paycheck. I work as a night shift nurse at a busy emergency room. After 2 years of dealing with back-to-back 12-hour shifts during the pandemic, I was completely burned out. My supervisor forced me to take some time off when she caught me falling asleep standing up while checking on a patient. That's when I decided to book a 7-day cruise to the Caribbean with money I had been saving up for months. The first few days were exactly what I needed. I spent most of my time reading by the pool, getting massages at the spa, and actually sleeping more than 4 hours at a time. By day 4, I was finally starting to feel human again. That evening, I decided to treat myself to one of those fancy cocktails at the deck bar. The bartender made me this elaborate tropical drink with 3 different types of rum, passion fruit juice, and a whole pineapple slice garnish. It cost $18, which was way more than I usually spend on drinks, but I figured I deserved it after working so many double shifts. I found a quiet spot along the railing where I could watch the sunset while sipping my drink. The ocean was this incredible deep blue color, and for the first time in months, I felt completely relaxed. That peace lasted about 10 minutes. This woman came storming over to where I was standing. She was probably in her 50s, wearing a bright pink sundress. She told me she thought I had her drink. I asked her what she meant. She explained that she had ordered that exact cocktail at the bar, and when she came back from somewhere, it was gone. She said I must have taken it by mistake. I looked down at my drink, then back at her. The bartender had literally handed it to me 5 minutes ago. I told her that this was definitely my drink and that I had just ordered it from the bartender. She said that was impossible. She insisted she had ordered that same drink and left it right on the railing where I was standing while she went to the bathroom. I explained that I had been standing there the whole time. There was no drink there when I arrived, and this was the one the bartender made for me. She stepped closer and I could smell the alcohol on her breath. This clearly wasn't her first drink of the evening. She said she didn't know what kind of scam I was trying to pull, but that was her $18 cocktail and she wanted it back immediately. I told her I understood there might be some confusion, but I could show her my receipt if she wanted. I told her this was definitely my drink. I started reaching into my purse to find the receipt the bartender had given me, but she wasn't having any of it. She said she didn't want to see any fake receipt. She demanded I just give her back her drink so we could forget the whole thing happened. I told her I wasn't giving her my drink. I suggested that if she thought hers was taken by mistake, maybe she should talk to the bartender. I was sure he could make her another one. She said she had already talked to him and he claimed he didn't remember making her drink. She accused someone of paying him off to lie. I stared at her. The idea that I would bribe a cruise ship bartender to lie about a cocktail was so absurd I didn't even know how to respond. I asked her why she thought I would pay someone to lie about a drink I legitimately bought. She said it was because people like me always think we can get away with stealing from hard-working Americans. I felt my face get hot. She was not only accusing me of theft, but also making it into some weird political statement. I told her I was going to walk away, and suggested she do the same before things got out of hand. I started to move away from the railing, but she grabbed my arm. She told me I wasn't going anywhere with her property. I demanded she let go of me right away. She said she would let go when I gave her back her drink. I told her I wasn't giving her anything and threatened to call security if she didn't let go of my arm. That's when things went from bad to completely insane. Instead of letting go, she actually tried to grab the drink out of my other hand. When I pulled it away from her, she lost her balance slightly and stumbled backward. She yelled that I had made her stumble and that I was going to pay for it. Before I could react, she rushed forward and gave me a hard shove toward the railing. I'm only about 5 feet tall and weigh maybe 110 pounds, so the force of it sent me stumbling backward toward the edge of the deck. For a split second, I felt myself going over the railing. The ocean was at least 50 feet below, and I realized this crazy woman was actually going to push me overboard over a cocktail. Panic kicked in and I threw my whole body weight forward, shoving her back as hard as I possibly could. She went flying backward and crashed down onto the deck, landing hard on her side. The sound she made when she hit the ground brought people running from all directions. Within seconds, there were at least 20 passengers gathered around us, and ship security arrived about a minute later. The security officer asked what had happened. Karen was still lying on the deck, moaning dramatically and clutching her hip. She claimed that I was a psychopath who had attacked her. She said she was just trying to get her stolen drink back when I pushed her down. She insisted she thought her hip was broken. I told him that wasn't what happened at all. I explained that she had tried to push me overboard and I had only defended myself. The security officer looked back and forth between us. I could tell he was trying to figure out who to believe. He asked if anyone had seen what happened. An elderly gentleman who had been sitting nearby stepped forward. He said he saw the whole thing. He explained that the woman in pink had been harassing me about a drink, then tried to push me over the railing. He said that I had only pushed back to keep from going overboard. Several other passengers nodded and agreed with his story. One woman even had her phone out and said she caught part of it on video. The medical team arrived and checked both of us over. Karen kept insisting her hip was broken and demanded to be taken to the ship's medical center. I had some bruising on my arms where she grabbed me, but nothing serious. Security took statements from everyone who witnessed the incident. Every single person backed up my version of events. The woman with the phone showed them her video, which clearly showed Karen shoving me first. After about an hour of investigation, the head of security came to talk to me privately. He explained that based on the witness statements and video evidence, it was clear that I had acted in self-defense. However, he warned me that Karen was claiming she wanted to press charges against me for assault when we reached port the next day. I asked if she could actually do that. He said she could try, but given the evidence, he doubted any prosecutor would take the case. He also pointed out that I had grounds to press charges against her for assault and potentially attempted murder, given that she had tried to push me overboard. I hadn't really thought about pressing charges until he mentioned it, but the more I considered what could have happened, the angrier I got. This woman had literally tried to push me off a cruise ship over a misunderstanding about a cocktail. I asked what I would need to do. He said they would provide all the witness statements, video evidence, and their incident report to local authorities when we docked the next morning. The next morning, both Karen and I were escorted off the ship by local police. Karen was still maintaining her story about being the victim, but when the officers reviewed all the evidence, they arrested her instead. I spent about 3 hours at the police station giving my statement and reviewing the evidence the cruise line had provided. The detective handling the case told me that Karen was being charged with assault and attempted manslaughter. He explained that the video clearly showed her trying to push me overboard. Given the height of that deck above the water, a fall could easily have been fatal. 3 months later, I received a call from the prosecutor's office. They told me that Karen had agreed to plead guilty to assault charges in exchange for dropping the attempted manslaughter charge. She received 18 months in prison and had to pay a $5,000 fine. I've been friends with her since high school, and back then I didn't really notice how she handled money. We were both broke teenagers living with our parents, so most of our hangouts involved walking around the mall or sitting in parking lots talking. It wasn't until we both moved out and started working that I began to see a pattern. The first big red flag was about 6 months ago when we decided to celebrate her getting a promotion at the retail store where she works. I suggested we go to this cute brunch place downtown that I've been wanting to try. The atmosphere was nice, nothing too fancy, but definitely a step up from our usual fast food runs. We both ordered pretty similar things. Eggs Benedict for her, French toast for me. We split an order of bacon. When the bill came, it was $50 total. Not terrible for 2 people, but not exactly cheap either. I was already reaching for my wallet when she suddenly got a phone call. She told me it was her mom calling and that she had to take it. She asked if I could just handle the bill and said she'd pay me back later. Before I could even respond, she was walking outside to take her call. I sat there staring at the check for a minute, then just paid it. When she came back, she acted like nothing had happened. I brought up the money later that day. I told her that her half of brunch was $25. She said she totally forgot and promised she'd get me next time. Spoiler alert, there was no next time. She never brought it up again, and I felt too awkward to keep pushing it. I chalked it up to her being forgetful and maybe a little stressed about money. We all have those moments, right? But then it happened again and again. Small amounts here and there. $5 for coffee, $12 when we split an appetizer, $8 for movie theater snacks. always with the same promise that she'd get me back, and somehow she never did. I started keeping a mental tally, and it was adding up fast. The weird thing was, she never seemed actually broke. She was constantly buying new clothes, always had her nails done, and would post photos of expensive smoothies and takeout on social media. She just seemed to have selective amnesia when it came to paying me back. I work at a small accounting firm doing data entry. It's not glamorous, but it pays slightly better than minimum wage. She works at a clothing store in the mall, probably making about the same as me. Neither of us is rolling in money, but we're both adults with jobs. We should be able to handle our own expenses. Last Tuesday, she texted me asking if I wanted to grab dinner. She suggested P.F. Chang's, which honestly surprised me. It's not super expensive, but it's definitely pricier than our usual spots. I almost suggested somewhere cheaper, but I've been craving Asian food all week, so I agreed. The restaurant was pretty busy when we got there around 7. We got seated at a table near the window, and I immediately started scanning the menu for something reasonable. Everything looked good, but I was being careful about what I ordered since I'd learned from past experiences. I went with the honey chicken, which was one of the cheaper entree options at $18. I also just ordered water to drink. She took her time looking over the menu, asking the server questions about different dishes. She asked the server what the difference was between the Mongolian beef and the orange peel beef. The server explained that the Mongolian beef had more of a savory sauce with scallions and onions, while the orange peel beef was sweeter and had a citrus glaze. She thought about it for a moment and decided on the orange peel beef. She also ordered a Mai Tai. The orange peel beef was $23, and I knew the Mai Tai was probably another $12 or $13. I did some quick math in my head. Her meal was going to cost almost twice what mine did. We chatted while we waited for our food, catching up on work drama and talking about weekend plans. The food was actually really good when it came. I was glad we'd chosen this place, even if it meant eating ramen for lunch the rest of the week. When we finished eating, the server brought over the check. I looked at the total, $80.48. Higher than I'd expected, but not shocking given where we were and what she'd ordered. She said she put the bill on her card and I could just Venmo her my half. I nodded and pulled out my phone to open the app. I started typing in $40, then paused. Wait, my half? My meal was $18 plus tax, probably around $21 total. Her meal was at least $35 with a drink, but she'd said my half, so I figured she meant half of the total bill. I told her I was sending her $40. She reminded me not to forget the 48 cents. I stared at her for a second, thinking I'd misheard. I asked if she meant the 48 cents. She confirmed that my half was $40.24. I felt my face getting hot. After all the times I'd overpaid, after all the money she'd never paid me back, she was seriously going to nickel and dime me over 48 cents, and not even 48 cents total, but 24 cents that was supposedly my share. I told her that if we were being that exact, I'd send her 24 cents. I changed the amount to $40.24 and hit send. The payment went through with a satisfying little ding. Her expression shifted when she realized what I'd done. She asked why I'd only sent 24 cents instead of the full 48. I explained that if we were splitting the 48 cents, then my half was 24 cents. She said that wasn't how it worked and insisted that since the total bill was $80.48, half of that was $40.24. I pointed out that she had ordered a more expensive meal and an alcoholic drink while I just got the chicken and water. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. She claimed that we always split things evenly. I asked if we really did because I remembered paying for a $50 brunch by myself a few months ago. Her face went red, and she started fumbling with her purse. She said that time was different because she had a family emergency. I asked what about all the other times. The server came by to pick up the receipt and we both went quiet until he left. She grabbed her keys and stood up without saying anything else. The drive home was silent and awkward, but honestly, I felt lighter than I had in months. 2 years ago, I got my dog from the local shelter. She's a golden retriever mix, and honestly, She saved me just as much as I saved her. I was dealing with anxiety and feeling isolated, working alone all day. Having her around changed everything. That's how I met my ex. I was at the dog park one morning when she ran up to this guy who was sitting on a bench reading. She's always been friendly with strangers, and he seemed charmed by her. We started talking, and one thing led to another. He'd sometimes come over to my place, and yeah, he'd play with her and take her for walks when I was swamped with work deadlines. But make no mistake about it, she was always my dog. I paid the adoption fees, the vet bills, her food, her training classes, everything. Her microchip has my information, and all her paperwork is in my name. We dated for about 8 months. Things seemed to be going well, or at least I thought they were. He'd stay over a few nights a week, and my dog seemed to like having him around. She'd get excited when he came over, probably because it meant extra attention and longer walks. I thought we had something real. Then I found out about the cheating. It wasn't even that I discovered it myself. His guilt got the better of him and he confessed. Some co-worker he'd been seeing behind my back for 2 months. 2 months. I felt like such an idiot for not seeing the signs. All those times he said he had to work late. All those weekends he was suddenly too busy to hang out. The breakup was messy and painful. I told him to pack his stuff and get out. I needed time to process everything, and honestly, I just wanted him gone. My dog seemed confused by the whole thing at first. She kept looking toward the door like she was waiting for him to come back. But dogs are resilient, and after a few days, she settled back into our normal routine. About a week after the breakup, he started texting me, not apologizing or trying to get back together. No, he was asking about the dog. At first, it was just casual questions about how she was doing. I figured he genuinely cared about her, so I answered. But then the requests started. He asked if he could take her for a walk sometime. I said no. Then he asked if he could visit her at my place. Again, no. I wasn't ready to see him, and I didn't think it was healthy for either of us to maintain that kind of contact. He called me one evening and said he'd been thinking about the whole situation. When I asked what situation he meant, he told me he was talking about the dog. He said we needed to work out some kind of arrangement. I was confused and asked what he was talking about. He explained that since we basically raised her together, he thought he should get visitation rights. I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. I told him she wasn't a child, she was my dog. But he insisted that he had bonded with her too. He reminded me that he walked her, played with her, and fed her sometimes when I was busy. I asked if he was serious about this, and he confirmed that he was. He said he thought we should split custody 50-50. The entitlement was staggering. I pointed out that she was registered to me and I paid all her expenses. I reminded him that she was my dog. He argued that it didn't matter and that we were together when we had her. He claimed she was basically our dog. I told him no, she wasn't. I reminded him that he cheated on me and said he didn't get to keep parts of my life as consolation prizes. He got quiet for a moment, and I thought maybe he'd come to his senses. But then he came back with something even more ridiculous. He told me he'd already worked out a schedule where she could be with him Monday through Wednesday and with me Thursday through Sunday. I asked if he was insane. He even claimed he'd looked into it legally and said that in some states, pets are considered shared property in relationships. The audacity was unbelievable. Here was a guy who cheated on me, trying to negotiate custody of my dog like she was a timeshare. I told him the conversation was over and not to contact me again, but he called me selfish and accused me of trying to hurt him by keeping her away. I told him I was being selfish when he was the one who cheated on me and now wanted to take my dog. He kept insisting that we raised her together and that it wasn't fair to cut him out completely. I explained that what wasn't fair was what he did to our relationship. I made it clear that the dog stayed with me and that was the end of the discussion, but he wouldn't let it go. The texts started coming daily. Long paragraphs about how I was being vindictive and using the dog as a weapon against him. He even suggested we could alternate weeks, or that he could take her on weekends. The entitlement just kept escalating. The breaking point came when he showed up at my apartment unannounced. I was working in my home office when I heard the doorbell. My dog ran to the door, tail wagging. She still recognized his voice when he called through the door. I opened the door and asked what he was doing there. He said he came to see her because I wouldn't answer his texts about setting up a schedule. I told him there was no schedule because she was my dog. He said the whole thing was ridiculous and that he had rights. I told him no, he didn't, and that he needed to leave. He refused to leave without seeing her. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I told him he was trespassing and that I was asking him to leave my property. He said he just wanted to say goodbye to her properly. I told him he said goodbye when he cheated on me and destroyed our relationship. He told me to be that way but said he was getting a lawyer. He claimed I just steal someone's dog because I was mad. I explained that she was never his dog and threatened to call the police if he didn't leave right away. He finally left, but not before making one last, desperate attempt. He offered me $500 for shared custody, claiming it was more than fair. I slammed the door in his face. Later that evening, I got a text from an unknown number. It was his sister saying she knew my ex and I had broken up, but that he was really upset about the dog. She asked if we could work something out. His family was getting involved. I simply responded that the dog was mine and this wasn't up for negotiation. She texted back saying he really loved that dog. I told her then he shouldn't have cheated and I blocked the number. The harassment continued for another week. More texts, more calls, even an email with a formal custody proposal that looked like he'd spent hours drafting. It outlined everything from pickup times to veterinary decision-making. The entitlement was beyond comprehension. I took all the documentation I had, adoption papers, vet records, registration information, everything was my name on it, and I went to the police station. I filed a harassment report and got a restraining order. The officer who helped me was sympathetic, but also seemed amused by the situation. He asked if my ex really wanted custody of my dog. I confirmed that's what he was claiming, even though she was registered to me, and I paid for everything. The officer asked if he had contributed financially to the dog's care. I told him maybe $20 worth of treats over 8 months. He asked if I had all the paperwork proving ownership. I confirmed I had everything: adoption papers, vet records, registration, microchip information. The officer said it should be pretty straightforward then. The restraining order was approved within a few days. When it was served, he finally got the message. The texts stopped, the calls stopped, and he never showed up at my apartment again. A few months later, I heard through mutual friends that he was telling people I'd stolen his dog and that he was considering taking me to court. Apparently, he'd even consulted with a lawyer who told him he had no case whatsoever. The lawyer explained that pets are considered property, and since all the documentation was in my name, there was no legal basis for his claim. The audacity still amazes me. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.